It is Sunday morning on 104.5 WOKV, and we are protecting military families with Chris Brochu, owner of Brochu Law. Chris, we do a lot of military conversation, but this one's for everybody now, and it's one people are going to want to hear. But first off, how are you this morning?
Casey, good morning. I'm doing well. Before we get into it, I just want to make sure everybody knows if you have a military benefit that you have a question about, if you have a military legal claim, if you have any question at all, military family or civilian, feel free to give us a call. Our direct line's 904-201-1771, brochulaw.com. Phonetically, that's Bravo, Romeo, Oscar, Charlie, Hotel, Umbrella, brochulaw.com. And the best way, and we can set up a free consultation, would be case@brochulaw.com, CASE@brochulaw.com. So second opinion's always free. The only way that, if we identify a claim, the only way that we would move forward is if we both, agreed to, and we'd sign a fee agreement. We never require any money from military or civilian families up front. There's no fee unless we win, work on a contingency fee basis, and we advance all costs on behalf of military families and civilians. So,
absolutely. Military families, if you think you might need help, get at Chris, as he told you to do, case@brochulaw.com. Go back on his website, by the way, or WOKV.com. If you go on WOKV.com, you can find audio versions of all the shows we did talking about TSGLI, talking about VA benefits, all kinds of things. Or you can watch a video version of the show on Chris's website, thanks to Justin at Nova Production. So you can do either of those, find out the information you might need to know, and then get in contact with Chris. Chris, though, I have a feeling people are going to get in contact with you after this week. We're talking robocalls. We're talking spam texts. I guarantee you my phone's going off right now with the robocall. Everybody gets them. What are we covering here today?
Yeah, I can't think of something that probably touches every fabric of society. I think they pester us all, and thankfully Florida lawmakers are giving consumers the ability to fight back. We're talking about Florida's newest consumer statute, at least one of the newest ones. It's a little less than a year old. We refer to it, and just for today, and if we talk about it in general, we're going to refer to it as Florida's mini TCPA. TCPA just stands for the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. That's a federal statute that was enacted to prevent basically phone calls to your cell phone using a pre-recorded voice or automated telephone dialing system without your prior express consent. The Florida Mini TCPA has similar elements. There are some distinctions. The biggest thing to know is that there was a Supreme Court case in April of 2021. It was a Facebook, DeGuide v. Facebook, and the Supreme Court basically did away with a lot of the consumer-friendly case law. So the TCPA at the federal level is no longer very consumer-friendly. It's very, very robocaller-friendly. But thankfully, Florida lawmakers, in response to that Supreme Court case, have come out with Florida's new mini TCPA.
Absolutely. So as we break that down a little bit, let's just start on the surface. You got robocalls, you got spam texts, but there's a lot of different ones. In terms of what we're talking about today, what's covered in this, what you were just talking about, what are the specific types of robocalls and spam texts that are covered that you could potentially stop from happening?
Right. We are talking today about robocalls and spam texts from companies that are advertising or marketing a product or service to you directly. So think of, a realtor reaching out, hey, do you want to sell your home, to an investor that says, we'll give you a cash offer, to somebody saying, buy this product, somebody saying, buy this service. Those are the types of things we're talking about. The Florida Mini TCPA does not have similar protections as the federal one in terms of debt collectors. So under the federal one, you could go after a debt collector if you told the debt collector to stop calling you and they continued to call you. So we're not talking about that today. And we're not talking about, the one that's going to make you rich if you send them 10,000, or the kid calling, from his parents' basement halfway across the world. We're only talking about viable companies that we can identify, because under this statute, the company and the caller is required to identify themselves. So anybody marketing or soliciting goods or services, products, or anything to you, that's who we're referring to when we talk about mini TCPA today and how you can fight back against them. As for the other companies, right, the spammers and the kid calling from his mom's basement and some of them, contact the FTC. Give them the number. The more complaints they get, the more the FTC investigates, and they'll actually go after some of these spammers and scammers and all of these companies, shut them down. And they will contact a lot of times these cell phone providers and say, hey, you better stop these calls from going through or we'll fine you. Things like that.
I got you. So just to confirm, you said a little bit, if somebody says I should give them my bank account information and they'll make me rich, I should not do that.
Definitely not. Okay, no sensitive information. Never, ever give anything like that over the phone.
Yeah, just to confirm, I figured but you might not know. Don't give your bank account information out. All right, let's talk about this law in specifically. Tell me a little bit. You told me that you have to be told in writing that these people can contact you. Kind of break that down. What are they really doing that they're not allowed to do?
So the called party, or the consumer that's receiving these robocalls or spam texts, and we'll talk about further damages later, but could be entitled to $500 per call.
Oh.
We're not talking about anyone other than Florida residents, by the way. So if you have a 904 number, or if you're new to the area and you don't have a 904 number yet, but you're a resident of the state of Florida and you're receiving robocalls or spam texts, you would apply, right? Because you're in, you're governed under this Florida statute.
Just to confirm, like you say 904 because that's the Jacksonville area code, but like 941 in Palmetto.
Sure.
Any Florida, it doesn't have to be 904, just to confirm.
Yeah, I was
here's an example.
I was more saying for our listeners here locally, but yeah, anybody that sees this from the Keys to the Panhandle to Tampa to Miami and anywhere in between with, that resides in Florida would be protected by this state law.
Perfect. Just wanted to clear that up. And then, as you were saying, so if you have the Florida number, then what? What happens?
So if you have that Florida number, anybody that is making solicitation calls to you, right, and they're trying to sell a good or service, they have to have your prior express written consent. And that simply means at some point before you received that call, you told them that they could make or place that call to your cell phone. And we're going to talk a little bit about what type of call cannot be made, right? Like there are automated telephone dialing system calls that can't be made without prior express written consent. There are pre-recorded texts and voicemails and those types of calls that would be prohibited without prior express written consent. But the biggest thing to know is, hey, look, if you never signed up to receive a mortgage quote or a landscaping quote or name it, this individual likely doesn't have your prior express written consent to be communicating with you, right?
Yeah, and you say likely. So the question that I guess I would have is there a way that they can get that without us like knowing we're doing it? Like, or do you have to go out of your way to like, okay, yes, contact me?
And I don't think so. Primarily, based off of the language, and there's not enough case law to tell, but you don't need to tell them to stop calling. If they never received your, prior express written consent to begin with, you don't need to tell them. And the common one that you see is, let's say you get a new phone number, somebody else had reached out about something. If they're now contacting you and harassing you about somebody else's, whatever they had signed up for,
right,
they're now going to be on the hook because they've got to keep their internal do not call list and all of that up to date as well. They're required to do that under federal law. So if their internal do not call list isn't up to date and they're they're calling, third parties that haven't given prior express written consent, that's also going to be a problem for them as well.
When you talk about the type of calls, you said it there a little bit, but let's go into that a little bit right now. The type of calls that if somebody, like people get a lot of spam calls, right? So which ones actually fall under this? Like if someone picks up the phone right now or gets a voicemail, it's a spam call. What should they be looking for to maybe fit into this new thing that's going on in Florida?
To prove that you have a claim under this mini TCPA, you'd want to, screenshot, right? That's a great way to do it. You can request your records, right? So a company like Metro PCS, I think they keep your call records for around a year. A company like Verizon, I think, keeps your call records for up to 2 years. So if you knew what phone number they were calling from and you could pull the phone log, that's great. If a lot of times if you have one of those third-party call blocking systems, you can pull your log from there. Mm-hmm. So you may be getting calls and not even know about it, right? Because your call blocking company may ring a couple times to your phone. By the time you look down, they say, okay, you didn't give your consent, send it over. Those would all potentially qualify. So what you'd want to do is you always want, if somebody sent you a text message, who are you? What company are you calling from? What are you trying to sell? I mean, why are you communicating with a consumer as the caller if you never had permission to do so?
Yeah. And from that, the calls that you get would have to be someone trying to sell something? Is that how that would work?
Somebody advertising something or soliciting something.
I gotcha. Okay. So that's kind of the start of it on 104.5 WOKV, Jacksonville's News and Talk, protecting military families with Chris Brochu. Chris, obviously with these calls, there's more than just that. You told me that there's times and amount of calls you can get per day to qualify. Just kind of expand on that a little bit. What window, if you're getting these calls, should be red flag?
So we always say red flag, red flag, red flag. If you get one call, right, without your prior express written consent, that may be enough to prove if you have the facts to back it up. If you are receiving more than 3 calls, even with your prior express written consent, this may still fall into that area of a violation. And again, the more egregious, the more money this company will pay. They could be on the hook for treble damages, meaning if they are calling you day after day after day, trying to solicit or advertise something to you, and you tell them, hey, look, stop calling me. Like I've got a company right now, I'm not kidding you, calls me every single day. I've told them via email, I've told them on the phone, please stop calling me. Please put me, I've done these cases, I've litigated several of these cases. I know exactly what they're doing, and they probably don't realize it, or maybe they do, but I've told them, put me on your internal do not call list, stop calling me. They still call me, right? I don't have any clue why, right? I'd never talked to them. They found me somewhere online, right? Found me in some attorney database. I don't know. That whatever they're soliciting me is for attorneys. Mm-hmm. They don't have my permission to do it. But so what you do is you just basically keep track of it, right? You keep a call log. They called me on this phone number. It was this company. Here was the person that was calling. Here was the time. Here was the date. And if they left you a message, a lot of times the pre-recorded ones, they might change Casey, Justin, Chris, Mike, Tim, right? But the information is identical. So what they're doing on their end is they've got a database of numbers and they click send and it spam text the same or pre-recorded call, voicemail, whatever it is, to 10,000 people at one time. There's no, you can read any of these pre-recorded texts or voicemails and know almost immediately whether or not it is directed at you or if it's just, blasted to everybody.
Yeah. So in terms of your situation, that's got to be poor decision making, right, by the company to call an attorney over and over?
I would think it would be. Maybe they don't think of it that way, but yeah, I don't. And the hard part is that, you've got to pick and choose your battles. And that's why I was saying earlier, if you've got a company that's not viable, report them to the FTC. If you've got somebody that you can't collect from, right? You've got somebody that if you sued them and won a judgment, or you sued them and got an award from them and you'd never be able to collect a dime from it, report them to the FTC, make it their battle. But if it's a company that probably has insurance to back this up, probably does this every day to consumers, right? Harasses them, fight back. That's the only way to get this to stop is to either report it to the FTC or to fight back. Otherwise, you're just, kind of spinning your wheels. And I report them. My number's on the internal do not call list at a lot of places. I report them to the FTC. I mean, I try to do my best, but it's not 100%.
Yeah.
So
I think that's interesting that you say that, because I think most people, when they get spam texts or spam calls like I do, like I straight up just hit block and move on with my day. Like, is it more productive to not block them and wait for them to leave you a voicemail and then report them? Like, is that what people should be doing instead of blocking?
Well, you can still block them and still, receive 500 a call because they're technically still ringing to your phone. But and again, maybe that will differ from, a TCPA scenario. But as long as you're receiving that call, that communication, and it's disrupting your day, even if it's simply an annoyance, then you may be eligible for 500 a call. The other part of it too is that if you can prove that this company had knowledge that you told them to stop, or maybe they're really harassing you, right? They're calling you 5-6 times a day, maybe more than 3. I don't know what number. I don't think we have any cases on that, but you could get treble damages, $1,500 a call, right? After that point where the court believes, okay, yep, this is the threshold. Once they've made every call from this point forward, this person's entitled to $1,500 a call. Again, we'll go off the federal statute, the TCPA. That happened, right? That there were a lot of cases where, this consumer told you on this date to stop calling. Any call made after that date's, worth $1,500. And you wouldn't believe the amount of companies. It was TCPA before this DeGuide decision at one point in time was the most litigated case in federal court across the country. I think it was around 2,000 filings a year. Because at some point, these companies are just willing to, hey, we'll just risk it all. And then if we get caught doing something that's not allowed, we'll just pay the fine and move on. And, that's what we're trying to prevent, right? Just don't do it. Do it the lawful way. Get their consent and,
do it from there. Absolutely.
Right.
You mentioned it there. I'm sure people heard it. Potentially up to $500 a call people could be getting for these robocalls. Chris,
Sure.
How do they get their money?
Sure. So what you would do is you basically would keep track of your call log. If you have one of those call blocking apps, there are several out there. You can pull your log, right? And you can see, okay, this 800 number was calling me. Here are the dates, right? Or, you can keep track on your own, right? In an Excel spreadsheet. You can take screenshots. So you could take screenshots of all of them. That's how I've seen them. But yeah, there are several consumers that I know that have gotten healthy 5-figure and a couple 6-figure awards from getting unlawful phone calls. And a lot of times these aren't class actions, so they're individual cases. If it's a class action, you could get even more. There are some right now you could look up that are closing in on 9 figures. I think one of the biggest ones that a bank got hit with was like 75 million, maybe more. And the other, to kind of get back to the damages portion, the other part of the Florida Mini TCPA that's good is that, again, we don't charge anything up front to litigate these. Client may be entitled to $500 per call if we can prove it was egregious, $1,500 a call. And, the offending party, the calling party, may be on the hook for our attorney's fees and costs as well.
Wow. That is crazy. The amount of money that you could be entitled to. And honestly, it feels like, and correct me if I'm wrong, feels like a pretty easy thing to find out, right? You just kind of do a little bit of research on your phone, listen to these voicemails you're getting, and then maybe contact you, or is it not that easy?
I think that if you like the investigation side, because a lot of times you got to dig around, right? You've got to figure out who the called party is, or excuse me, not the called party, who the caller is. And, a lot of times they'll hide the ball. Maybe they aren't going to be completely candid with you. So you've got to do some digging, figure out who they are, why they're calling, what company they're calling from. And then, as long as you can offer proof in one of the ways that we talked about, right? Your own call log or a third-party call log, or maybe your cell phone company provider call log. You can try to use those to fight back. And you wouldn't believe, even when you've got a company dead to rights, they'll still fight it. They're still going to defend it. They're still going to, try to get it thrown out of court. And, that's their right. That's everybody in this country has a right to due process. And so they're not just going to roll over and give you, 500 times 100 calls, but
it's possible.
They may be on the hook for that if they take it all the way to trial. So
interesting. It's definitely an interesting thing because we all know about the robocalls and the spam texts. So the idea that you could potentially be compensated or get money for it if they're doing it unlawfully is definitely an interesting thing that we will continue to dive into in the next half hour of the show after we hit this quick break. We are protecting military families on 104.5 WOKV Jacksonville's News and Talk with Chris Brochu, the owner of Brochu Law. If you need his help, need to get at him, have a question for him, case@brochulaw.com, which is spelled phonetically.
Bravo, Romeo, Oscar, Charlie, Hotel, Umbrella.
So you can get at him with your questions if you are a military family, or if not, maybe you have questions about the robocall situation, and Chris might be able to help you out. Get at him there or give him a call at 904-201-1771. If you missed any of the first segment, go back and listen, WOKV.com, or on Chris's website, brochulaw.com. There's a video version of the show that you can find thanks to our guy Justin at Nova Productions. When we come back, we got more to talk about on this topic, including how do they make so many robocalls and texts? How does it happen so fast and so quickly, mass-produced? We'll talk about that a little bit on the other side. This is 104.5 WOKV. We'll be right back. Welcome back. 104.5 WOKV, Jacksonville's News and Talk on a Sunday morning, protecting military families with Chris Brochu, owner of Brochu Law. Second opinion, if you need it on anything in your military family, hit up Chris at case@brochulaw.com, spelled BROCHU, brochulaw.com. He will look at your situation, give it a second opinion, and see if he can do anything for you. We spent most of the topic, or most of the first segment today, Chris, talking about robocalls and spam texts and how you might be able to be compensated for getting those calls and texts, but let's just remind the people, if you're just jumping in, obviously, or if you've been listening the whole time, how does this work? Why are people potentially able to get money? What is the reason for that? Right.
So you could be entitled to up to $500 per call. Florida has a new law that came out in summer of 2021 that prohibits robocalls and spam texts using a pre-recorded voice or something that fits into a definition of the statute's automatic telephone dialing system. ATDS is the acronym that it's commonly referred to. So if you're getting calls to your cell phone and you identify that it's a pre-recorded voice or pre-recorded text, and the called party is soliciting something, advertising a good or a service or some product, without your prior express written consent, meaning you never told the company in writing that they can communicate with you, they may be in violation of this law and you may be entitled to $500 a call. Now, if you tell this company, hey, I never reached out to you. The person before me that had this phone number was the one you were talking to, not me. Please leave me alone. And they keep hounding and hounding and hounding you, right? They're calling you nonstop, now you might be entitled to treble damages, $1,500 a call. The beauty of it is you don't have to pay anything to our firm to litigate one of these cases. We take them all on a contingency fee basis, so there's no fee unless we win. Our fee would come out of, obviously, any potential award, judgment, settlement, and the opposing party may also have to cover, our attorney's fees and costs. So I know that's a lot to kind of take in, but basically if a company is calling you soliciting or advertising goods or services without your prior express written consent, feel free to give us a call. There's no fee unless we win. We advance all costs, on behalf of consumers, military families, civilian families. And again, you've got to be able to recognize who the caller is. So if the caller is a kid calling from his mom's basement, or if it's some spammer or somebody who won't identify themselves, that's not a case that we would be able to assist with. But if you can say, hey, this company called me on this date from this phone number, they were trying to sell me X, I never signed up for X, that's a conversation that we can discuss with you.
Absolutely. And you just mentioned it, obviously, for your firm, no fee unless you win. So is it worth it? If somebody's getting these calls, in your opinion, obviously, do you think it's worth it for people to contact you and maybe go through the steps to do this for the potential payout they could get?
I can tell you from the Federal Telephone Consumer Protection Act cases that I've seen and the consumer blogs that I follow, there are individuals that are receiving, I would think money that was worthwhile. So not only are they protecting themselves and their families, but they're also, hitting these companies where it hurts, right? Because they're not going after the companies that are complying with the law. They're going after the companies that are trying to cut corners and get a leg up on competition, right? So if you know of anybody that's, again, scammed consumers, harassing consumers, anybody that's preying on, our military families or members of our community with different businesses or things like that, we want to hear about it. We want to try to stop them. Obviously, if there's something we can do, we will. So
you mentioned also in that previous answer, prior express written consent. What exactly is that? Is it just as simple as telling somebody like, hey, yes, you can call me? Is it just that simple, or is there more to it?
Prior express consent would be something oral, similar to what you said. So, you can call me, right? Prior express written consent is they have to have your consent in writing. So if you ever read the terms and conditions, I'm probably the only nerd that does. In there, you'd see a portion that says you agree that we can contact you, solicit you, advertise to you using an ATDS system, pre-recorded voice, dialing system, whatever type of system you want to talk about. There's usually a section in those terms and conditions or something that you're checking that says that you're giving them express permission. But a lot of times, prior express written consent, but a lot of times you got companies calling you that they got your phone number from a list, or they're calling the previous owner and you've told them to stop and they never update their internal do not call list. So
sure. I teased it a little bit before the first break we took here on 104.5 WOKV, Jacksonville's News and Talk, and you just brought it up again, so we'll talk about it now. Dialing machines, auto dialing systems. What are those things? How does that work, and how do they play into this exact situation?
So they're all different, right? There are some predictive dialers where you can kind of go from this automated setting to more of a manual one, right? You upload call lists, you store call lists. There are all these things like do they dial sequentially? These are all part of the statute, but the biggest thing to know is that we're going to figure out what type of dialing system it is, and as I'm sure anybody that receives these, which probably everyone does, when you get a missed call and you get a voicemail and the voicemail is identical and you know that it's not tailored to you, but it's whoever they associate that phone number with, that's most likely an auto dialer. That's most likely a pre-recorded voice. You get that text where it doesn't even say your name. It just says, hey, buy this product, sell this, list your house with us, right? That's probably some sort of dialing system or pre-recorded voice. So that's how you can identify a quick call. Sometimes I'll get a call to my phone. It'll ring once and then stop. Mm-hmm. That's usually, similar.
You mentioned there's a couple different ones. Does it matter which one is which for this specific situation to get compensated for it? Like, do they do different things, I guess I could say?
No, because the statute would cover both types. It just, certain times you'll receive a pre-recorded voice and certain times you'll get a live caller a lot of times, right? And it sounds live, but it's not live because when you pick up, nobody's there. It's kind of that dead air. Mm-hmm. And then you hear a click. What happens is these companies have these systems where it'll call, I don't know, let's say they have 5 people in the call center and they call, however many phone numbers at a time, 50, 100, 200. As people pick up, they patch them through 2 different calling agents. So there's nobody in there physically dialing a number. The system dials it, then people are in the queue, and then they wait until a rep becomes available.
I gotcha. I see. And then going off that, I guess, a little bit, if you are getting these calls, what is the best way to kind of identify and figure out who's calling you and if it's inside the statute that you might be able to get the money from?
So you never want to give anyone any of your personal identifiable information, right? You never want to give them your banking information, your social, any information at all. If they are a legitimate company that you work with, they would already have that, right? So you don't need to give it. You don't need to provide it. But if you receive a text message, for instance, text the party back. Who is this, right? What are you looking to sell me? How'd you get this number? Figure out whatever you need to get that information, and then you keep track of it. If you are getting calls or texts from the same number over and over and over again, and you haven't been able to answer one, or they haven't, identified themselves, if there's some way for you to reverse engineer it, right? If they call you and then you type it in on Google and you can figure out who it is, that's a way to do it. But you just keep track of it in a call log, take screenshots. A lot of times, you can call your cell phone company and get your call records. But
sure. So there's a good couple ways to identify what's going on there and try to help this process go into motion if you're going to try to be compensated for these calls. This is 104.5 WOKV, Jacksonville's News and Talk, protecting military families on a Sunday morning with Chris Brochu, owner of Brochu Law. If you need his help, case@brochulaw.com, CASE@BROCHULAW.com. Also, you can give him a call at 904-201-1771. Chris, when we talk about things that a lot of people could potentially be involved with, I think class action probably comes up. So I guess on the surface, we'll just start there. In general, for class action lawsuits, what are they? What do you need to have one? Obviously, you work with in situations like that. But just in general, what is a class action suit and how it fits here?
Consumer protection and class action go hand in hand because a lot of times the value of the individual case may not be, worth it to file one consumer against, $1 billion corporation. But what happens is when you've got a class action, and I've had a couple under my belt now where we worked on that were related to, one was a consumer issue where he didn't receive payment for good that he sold, and another one was related to a Navy veteran that we helped with the allegations were that he had a defective RV. He had water that was leaking in through the slide, right? The slide out. But basically what you do with a class action is you try to use the power of the class. So one person with a $50 claim or a $100 claim or a $250 claim, That's still a lot of money, right? $250. But to litigate a case from start to finish, if you don't even have experts, would cost thousands of dollars. So how does that one person get the company to take them serious? A class action. And I'm not talking about the coupon class actions, right, where you get 10% off to the Jelly of the Month Club. I'm talking about ones where you get actual value back. Those are the only ones that we do. The ones where our clients get actual value and the class gets actual value. Not the ones that are lining the attorney's pockets or lining the class rep's pocket, but the ones that actually help people. Because these companies, hate to break it to you, they know that nobody's going to bring this alone, right? You see these companies, you can look them up. Think about the banks that get hit with these, stealing $100 from every single person that's got a checking account. Who's going to file a lawsuit over $100? But $100 is a lot of money, right?
Absolutely.
And that's wrong. The crazy part is, in one of the settlements, and I won't put the bank on blast, they got in trouble for this. And then they settled, and people were ticked at the attorneys, right? They said, oh, look at the attorneys. They got us a fraction of that $100 back. But what people should be ticked off is that company got $60, $70 free and clear. Doing the wrong thing, right? They're stealing money from somebody in broad daylight, and everyone's ticked that the attorney didn't get more, or maybe they got a big fee for fighting for years. So what a class action does is it allows for consumers to fight back by taking the power of the class and adding all of these people together, because one person that company may not take serious, but when you have thousands of people, they've got to evaluate it differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you look at these type of cases, when you at least see them, do you often see with the robocalls and everything, does that usually become a class action, or do people take that home by themselves?
It would really depend. It would depend on the individual. It would depend on the amount of calls. It would depend on the factual scenario, right? Is the called party targeted by the company, or is it, hey, we bought this call list, we're going to send out the same message we'll send it once, but we'll send it to 100,000 people. I think it really just depends, but it's certainly not off the table. It really comes down to the value of the individual case versus if there's some way that we can make a class out of it. With these particular ones, they're so new. At least to my knowledge, there's never been a case under the Florida mini TCPA that's made it to class certification yet, which is the big motion hearing where basically the court decides whether or not it can be certified as a class. But there are certainly ones that have been filed.
When you say class certification, is that you have to get a certain number of people? Is that what that takes?
Yep. So exactly, the class action requirements are, you've got numerosity, you've got at least 30, 40 people to meet that requirement. So many people that joined her would be impracticable, right? Like you couldn't have 200 of these cases separate. And, you look at a case like a 3M, that's a mass tort, completely separate, right? We can get into that on another day, but a class action's one person who represents the interests of the entire class. So you've got numerosity, you've got, adequacy of counsel, you've got, common questions of fact or law. So basically, does everybody fit into this common question? There are other, elements to a class action as well. There's the basic point is, does everybody have a common issue? And if they do, right, if this company clicks send and it sent the same message to 10,000 people one time, more than likely your issue and my issue and Justin's issue, they may all be the same, right? And the reason it's the same is you get a call to your cell phone using a pre-recorded voice without your prior express written consent.
Yeah, I got you. So it's fascinating stuff. We got a little more to talk about it on this edition of Protecting Military Families with Chris Brochu on 104.5 WOKV, Jacksonville's News and Talk. Also a video stream version of the show on Chris's website, brochulaw.com. Thanks to Justin with Nova Productions. Chris, I put this down a little bit, and I'm wondering the penalty of this, because you said 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. is the window that you can call in, right? I got that correct?
Right, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. local time.
Yeah, so local time, that's a good point. What happens if you're calling outside of that window? Even if it's like you just said, like a local time, like you make a mistake with the time zone, but if someone's calling you at, I don't know, 6 a.m., how does that factor into what they already might be doing they shouldn't be, as in calling you without your consent, but now they might be calling you before the hours they can without your consent? How does that change what the penalty could be?
So Florida is interesting because we have 2 time zones. So if you get out to the panhandle, you've got a different time zone than we have in Jacksonville and throughout Florida. But primarily it's the caller that has the duty to figure out who they're calling. So if they're calling somebody in Pensacola, it's not the person in Pensacola's fault that the company didn't take the time to realize that they're not on Eastern Standard, and they called them at 6 or 7 a.m. So it's a good question, but yeah, really it goes off the local time of wherever the person is, resides. With that, does the penalty become more if you're calling them at 5 a.m.? In terms of, like, if you could get $500 a call, does it go up, or is it still just? It's an interesting question. I think it would be really interesting to see if that caller is persistent, right? And you would have to identify who that was. A lot of times you see that in a debt collection scenario. Florida has what's called the Florida Consumer Collection Practices Act. I've litigated some of those cases too. And basically what that says is that you can't contact a debtor, right? So somebody that owes a debt, let's say you had a credit card that you owed debt on or something like that. And, the company that's calling to collect it, they send you an email at midnight. They send you an email at 2 a.m. and your phone dings, right? They can't do that. They've got to only contact you between the specific statutory hours. It's similar in this particular case. And what I think, getting back to your point, what I think could potentially happen, I don't know, because I don't think there are any cases on it so far, but that may be how you get into that treble damages, right? You've got somebody who consistently breaks the law. Time and time again, they're calling outside of that 8 to 8 window, right? I think maybe that would be an argument. Certainly would be something that you could try, but I don't know if we have anything on point yet.
I got you. So look, at the end of the day, if you think you have a problem with the robocalls, with the spam text, with anything, Chris might be able to help you out with that. Case, CASE, at brochulaw.com, BROCHU, spelled phonetically, that would be
Bravo, Romeo, Oscar, Charlie, Hotel, Umbrella. We always want to spell it phonetically on this show so that there aren't any E's or extra R's thrown in there.
Yes, absolutely. I just don't want to mess it up.
Yeah, no,
so
for sure.
It's easier to have you do it. But so yeah, if you need his help, get Adam Case at brochulaw.com or 904-201-1771. Couple minutes to go, Chris. Like I've told you, if you're listening, there's a video version of the show you can find on Chris's website. And if you have been watching the video, there's like a bronze/golden chicken statue that's been here since we started. It's heavy. I have a lot of questions about it, but it's been looking at me today, so I just want to know what's going on here.
So this is a Chanticleer. So
okay,
Geoffrey Chaucer, right? He I don't know, he must have created the Chanticleer, but I went to Coastal Carolina University, and Chauncey's our mascot. He's a Chanticleer. I guess he looks like a chicken or a rooster. He's not a Gamecock, certainly not a USC Gamecock, but yeah, I absolutely love where I went to undergrad. I still go back. We do a lot of great things. We just donated a little over $30,000 for a project on campus there. My fraternity that I'm a part of, and I'm president of the Alumni Association for our fraternity and for our local chapter. And so, yeah, I always rep Chauncey, and I figured I needed a couple of hometown things to add in here. Sure. Maybe Coastal will give me a shout, but at the very least, I love it. I think it's great. So
yeah, it fits in. It's good. It's good decor. Old Chauncey, you said.
Chauncey, yeah.
Chauncey the Chanticleer.
That's right.
All right. I feel like I went there.
And we did have, I think, the most amount of student athletes drafted into the NFL this year. I think it was.
Oh yeah.
I think it was like at least 8 or 10, might have been 12, but
yeah,
doing great things over with that football program.
They are. Some of us here, well, I shouldn't say here, but on ESPN 690, otherwise known as me and Brent Martineau, wanted them to pick a tight end out of Coastal Carolina. Isaiah Likely, that didn't happen. So, but that's a conversation for a different station, Chris. And so now we know the story of some of the stuff that you can see on the video show. And if you're like, hey, what are you talking about? You're listening on the radio, go to Chris's website, brochulaw.com, and you can see it for yourself. But that's the story about it. And I'm glad that we now know. That'll do it for this week. Protecting Military Families with Chris Brochu right here on 104.5 WOKV. We're back at it next week. Join us then. Until then, have a great week.
Thanks, Casey.